please?
Hello, good afternoon or good morning to everyone here on the West Coast. So obviously, for me, it's afternoon. For some of you, it's later in the mid-afternoon. But nonetheless, I'd like to thank Sakura and for allowing me to present this webinar. So, first off, I'm here to discuss with you about digital pathology. Now, I apologize first if there are any technical issues because basically I'm taking a digital approach for a digital conference. But I'd like to have a disclaimer that I'm not a pathologist. I'm rather an engineer turned histotech, turned pathologist assistant, turned to LIS, then turned to whatever God else people know what they want us to be in the laboratory these days. But nonetheless, I would like to start out with this theme of Star Trek. If you guys are very familiar with the Star Trek theme, originally it was about going where no one has gone before. And in this Star Trek logo, obviously it's not that theme, but it's talking about the next generation. The next generation of anatomic pathology is where I find this being a crucial point, as it's providing a visual representation of where I feel we're heading in anatomic pathology. With the crux of personalized medicine, molecular, genomics, theranostic, proteomics, it's quite an exciting time for our field, but what I feel that we're missing these days is something like this, boldly going nowhere. Meaning that in my expertise, I see that digital pathology and all other aspects of anatomic pathology have to be put together and brought together with a grassroots approach, and primarily what this webinar entails. I do apologize. We kind of got ahead of the scan of the slides. So the first thing I'd like to start out is to see what our accomplishments are today here at Yuma Regional Medical Center. Right now, it might not seem as much, but there's been a decade, and what I mean by a grassroots approach is looking at the little idiosyncrasies of our workflows and how we would be able to bring in this type of technology and be successful. And just to give you an example of where my staff has been able to be successful is currently right now. That number, 30% of the workload scanned in IHC stains, we've changed that from 30% to 50%. Still holding that 1030 AM at 40 axis for IHCs. We went from 65 slides in a 5.5 hour period to 125 slides per hour in the period. We have done this with no additional FTEs or budgeted or required. We've actually lost staff due to either attrition or retirement, but we're still able to maintain the same workflow. We have also been able to encompass and put in electronic QA/QC data within our APLIS, as I will show you later, as well as being able to provide correlations from our traditional workflow as well as our improved digital workflow. And quite frankly, what we've been able to do at Yuma Regional Medical Center is provide what we feel is a hybrid of digital pathology, wherein hence we're able to take an analog approach, digitize it, and being able to look at workflow efficiencies. So, next slide. So what do I mean by a grassroots approach or a grassroots solution for digital pathology? I think it's very important that people understand that we need to look at the basic fundamentals on how we address our anatomic pathology department. Before you start taking on this type of technology, I think it's very important that you understand that there are specific technological advances that you need, i.e. an APLIS integration, scanners, your IHC machines, your H&E stainers, interface and barcoding that are going to be really pertinent in order to be successful in this. Besides that, we have to look at what we call materials management with the barcoding. We need to be able to place this on the blocks, the slides, and every other aspect. And when we barcode things, we just don't want it to be able to track and tell us who did what and how many times people did something, but we want that information to provide additional steps of being able to transfer data across all different types of anatomic pathology systems as well as our laboratory information system. From this aspect, when we start doing this, we need to start looking at our processes. And what I mean by our processes is our process embedding, cutting, distribution, and scanning, which I will show you later in later slides, where we need to look at our QA/QC process not from the standpoint of an analog approach, but being able to look at it from a digital approach, and for our technicians to become intimately involved in adding data, or any of our laboratory professionals for that matter, in adding data at the touch of a button or of a screen. Okay, by doing this and adding this data, we will be able to look at the downstream effect of what imaging is actually going to be able to create, where then we would be able to create vendor collaborations and being able to communicate with our vendors and create partnerships where we would have success in digital pathology. We also want to look at our storage approach. What is the business case for this? Do you want to have a static storage? Do you want to store 35 years of imaging, or do you want to just store based on a specific period amount of time? That is very, very important. The last thing next couple of things we need to look at is leadership. Our leadership has to take a shift from practice of a largely morphological based to integrating prognostic information into our decision making. We need to have collaborations with other pieces of the digital environment to include even radiology and pharmacy. And utmost important, lastly, is about workflow. People. It's a huge culture change to going from a inline workflow from the batch and processing that we're used to working with. We also need to look at what type of aspects this needs to take with our technologists and our pathologists. What is our IT and transcriptionists going to be able to understand with this new digital workflow? And not to mention all the regulatory and monitoring requirements that are required in the new digital workflow. Going to it, this day, when we're looking at scanners, a lot of people look at the scanners to see how fast and how clear they can basically do digital scanning. You know, I can scan a 1.5 by 1.5 area at 20x in less than 58 seconds. But what people don't really understand is what the workflow changes need to take place within the department to handle that, as well as addressing all the technological issues of the technology and people interfaces that we take with this. Because if you really think about it, 80% of the life cycle of image creation, meaning the slide itself, is not done by the pathologist, but rather the TA, the technician, histotech, the pathology assistant, or transcription, are all working together in conjunction to create this product that we call a slide, and then we have to digitize it. So what we need to look at is work at considerations to minimize the tidal effects. Where are the traffic dams within our processes? We need to look at, once again, when we start looking at embedding and cutting, how we need to get away from batching, which drives, you know, our throughput, especially when we look at staining and drying. I know a lot of us basically have our H&E stain racks, and we fill them up as best as we can and as quick as we can with the highest quality, and then we place it on our stainer. And depending on the type of mechanisms we have, we try to maximize our staining by thinking about putting through more baskets with more and more slides. But what we fail to understand is that it's wasted time. And what we did here at Yuma Regional Medical Center was we look at batching 10 slides. And by batching 10 slides, this is how we were able to use, which we have 2 scanners here, and be able to output the amount of slides we're able to do these days while only adding 20 minutes to a run. We also identified where case size drives throughput. Once again, organizing your workflow and identifying where you need to be able to provide the greatest bang for your buck when thinking about putting through for digital slides. You know, we also look at QA/QC time, and this is what is not discussed by the vendors. Needed to address the takt time of creating a digital image. So for instance, if you're taking 50 seconds to create a digital images, you're not taking into consideration placing it inside the scanner, making sure that whatever scanning modality you have, that it creates it correctly, and that if it creates it correctly, that all pieces of information are crossing. I think it's very, very important that people understand that the major impact of throughput is scan time plus QA time. Take that down specifically. When you ask about doing digital pathology, don't ask about how fast I can acquire an image. Ask about how much of the scan time plus the QA/QC time it needs to take to be able to do image. Because in the end, image redoing kills throughput. Okay, so ask once again your vendor to make sure that you understand what their redo rates are. Right now, anything above 5%, in my opinion, is way, way, way too much. And we're looking at elimination of batching. So we need to make sure that while we have a good quality product, that our redo rate due to the mechanism of the software is not causing us to have to continuously redo our scanned images. And so in the end, I kind of want to say is that we need to get the basics right at all costs. Make sure that we're able to transition to this technology effectively, as well as be able to provide a high throughput amount of quality product. So what happened when we went through this type of change within Yuma Regional Medical Center? Our staff had to own this process. The big thing we needed to do was look at, not from an inline process from block and slide creation, but we needed to look at the type of run cases we had and look at the average of the differentiation between the scanners, and to be able to say at the same token, you know, how do we effectively throughput the amount of slides through on both scanners? Not to mention the fact, as I stated before, about the digital product that we're creating and the QA/QC steps that need to be put in place. So we had to look at batch sizes, and our redo rates. We had to run different simulations from 1 to 2 to 0 scanners. We had to look at scanning images at different types of magnifications because, once again, when you scan at a magnification, it's a specific amount of time. When you scan at a higher magnification, it increases exponentially. At the same token, we had to look at our QA/QC time and make sure that it fell below 2 minutes, as well as our interfacing time with our APLIS. So here's a quick image right here, what I call about quality issues. Now, a lot of us know about the sins of anatomic pathology, and we all understand that there is no really perfect slide that we can make, but I just want to show you some of the artifacts that are amplified when you start using digital pathology. Many of us are aware a lot of the bubble problem. So if you take a look at the bubble problem and you look at the different contours that are here, this is the bubble actually created this type of artifact where we are starting to see out of focus. Now, most of us say, well, in a normal world, we can basically push the bubble out and then we can fix it, and there we go from there. When looking at the digital pathology world, not only are we using this to be able to see microscopic images, but we want to use digital pathology for the tools that it can provide us as well, looking at the fact of algorithm analysis, tumor expression, protein expression, and so on and so forth. This bubble itself could alter that fact, so that's why we need to have a tight QA/QC program. As well as we look at preparation artifact, we understand that in a slide we have a field of practically 1.5 to 2 by 4 area to place tissue. But as you place tissue, you can start seeing that variance is also created through algorithms when we're trying to capture the fields of view, or what they call FOVs, or areas of interest, depending on the type of software you have, which is called AOIs. And this can actually cause redo rate. Now, here is a very, 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 very unique situation here. When we ran this slide, we went ahead and scanned it. If you take a look at the slide closely, here on the bottom left as well as the top right, those are two pieces of tissue cut side by side. When we went ahead and digitized this slide, in this instance, we had to think, what was the situation that caused this? Is this not being deparaffinized all the way? Is this an issue with our stain? So all of a sudden, you start taking into consideration what's going on with your tissue stain at a more intimate level. And what we found out on this was basically this is thick and thin. We had one slice, the wheel speed of our microtome versus the wheel speed of the next section that came through, which was quite amazing because we were thinking we had an issue with staining itself. Okay. Now we start talking about and start getting away from the process of histology, and we start looking at the meat and potatoes of the software and the algorithms. And if anybody's familiar with, an algorithm is basically a mathematical expression or equation to identify where we need to be able to draw an area around a specific space or location. So the issue here at hand was, and this algorithms we've been holding and we've been testing our algorithms consistently and making sure we do QA/QC. But as you can see here in the top slide, all these algorithms, when you look at it, the box around the slide itself is in capturing the tissue. But when we look closer on the bottom slide here, the exact same tissue, you start seeing that the algorithm actually cut the tissue off. Now everybody says, well, what does that have to do? The number one thing in anatomic pathology for a histotech is to make sure that the entire surface area of a tissue is captured. But as you can see, this is my argument about QA/QC and 100% of digital imaging, that if we cut off one area right here, and if this is an H. pylori stain for that matter, we could be cutting off the area where the organism could be hiding. So as you can see, the idea of saying, well, we're only going to QA/QC 100% or 50%, so on and so forth, once again, you're creating an analog signal or an analog item and creating digitally. Once again, you're recreating this, and you need to make sure that what you started with is what you ended with. So I know this can get a little bit overbearing, and it seems like a lot, but I wanted to show you guys what we mean by, as we started going down this road, we understood that there was a new way of being able, a tidal wave of QA/QC involvement that we needed to start to take into consideration. And on average, before digital pathology, I spent anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks of getting information together and looking at ways to improve. Basically, the old way of being able to hand in papers that had multiple ticks and be able to put this in an Excel spreadsheet, so on and so forth. So by the time I was finished that, which was almost a week and a half to 2 weeks later, working 10 to 12-hour shifts, I would finally spit out something that was doable, but once again, it was 2 to 3 months later. Well, within our own digital pathology system, within the help of our LIS, we were able to input in data and have real-time metrics to be able to identify where we need to be able to improve our processes. So by incorporating the QA/QC data for the PLIS, it gives real-time information for that individual case where we can go back to the technicians at that point in time, not 1 week or 1 day or even 1 month or 3 months later, but that within minutes to identify where we need to start to modify our processes in order to get a better quality. This also provides the ability to leverage informatics. If you take a look, if you don't measure something, you don't know what's going on. But basically, we can provide statistics to my upper managerial and administration about how we're being able to put this data together and create a quality product. Because as we know, healthcare is changing. And it's not going to be about the amount of things we do, but the quality of things we're able to provide. So in this slide, I'm giving you guys kind of an information of what we need to do. So once you start to be able to place this data into our LIS, we're able to track in real time where our situations are. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, why are you showing your mistakes? Why are you showing where you can go ahead and you're having all these issues? I believe personally that unless you measure something, you don't know how much you can do to get better. And be able, in order to get better, you need to understand how many times you failed. Because as you continue to fail, you're going to get better. That's the idea of consistent improvement. So with the help of the LIS, we're able to identify these areas based on our subject matters, and we'll be able to find our peaks and our valleys and identify the variances in real time, as well as where we need to process improve. For instance here, folds and wrinkles and contamination. You wouldn't believe the contamination that you see in digital pathology underneath the cover slips. Even the cleanest cover slip, I have to tell you, I've tried 7 to 8 vendors for cover slips, and I've still to find a vendor that does not have hair or airborne fibers or any type of dirt within their cover slips. And as we continue to move forward, so here's what I provide to our techs on an hourly basis or a 30-minute basis whenever they want. Here we're able to identify, hey, we're having issues with this type of situation. And the funny thing is, if you look to the far left where it says bubbles under the section, what ended up happening was we received a new lot of mounting media from our vendor to find out that they changed people that were creating the mounting media, which in hence changed the way our refraction was for our digital pathology, as well as the amount of bubbles we get. So once again, when you start looking at digital pathology, it starts to look at things at the micro and macro levels where we never once thought about doing. Here's another area of where I say quality measures. So once again, not only am I measuring the analog process of the creation of the slide itself, but one of the important components that you have to take a look at is also looking at the digital itself. And here we're able to provide quality metrics on our IHC, where we're starting to see nonspecific staining. In this issue right here with the nonspecific staining and background staining, we found out a lot issue with the kits that we received from our vendor for our immunohistochemistry. And by doing this, we were able to give them real-time perspective of, hey, we have a situation. And quite frankly, almost about 2 to 3 months after we gave that information, not saying we were the cause, but we were confirmed that when the vendor sent us a letter stating that there was a variance in their lots and that we needed to go ahead and take a look at the situation. So then we move on to the quality metrics of image artifact as well as digital pathology. Now, there is no QA/QC program to date that I know of that basically outlines what specific artifacts or what specific QA/QC measures we have. So once again, this is what Yuma Regional Medical Center needed to do in order to develop their issues. But as you can see, as we start looking at these artifacts and I start looking at these metrics, we are starting to understand with the, for instance, the scanner as well as image artifact, where we need to send the attention to the vendor and be able to ID this so that we can go ahead and start correlations with our traditional processes as well as inform the vendor of where we're having issues with their instrumentation. At this point in time, you're starting to look at the different image artifacts. Now, when we started digital pathology, you can be overwhelmed by tons and tons of artifacts and tons of QA/QC measures. This is what we at Yuma Regional Medical Center decided to do. We started to look at the different types of things that would provide issues with patient safety, patient diagnosis, as well as software performance and hardware performance, as well as correlate with our traditional histological process. So as you can see right here, we saw not achieving all AOIs. And as you saw before within the H. pylori stain as well as the H&E stain, by not achieving all AOIs, meaning that we had an algorithm issue. Now, is that an algorithm issue or is it one of our product issues, our production issues? I will later then show you later in the next slide what that means. So on the next slide, you take a look at before as the AOIs were not being able to be correlated well because of either not getting all the tissue samples, so on and so forth. But if you look at it, when we start looking at correlations with the traditional QA/QC, our preparation as well as our sectioning artifact had a big variance or big impact on the algorithm itself. So we had to understand that on our end of sectioning, we thought we were doing well, but we even needed to do better. And if you talk to any techs at Yuma Regional Medical Center, that's probably one of the biggest things that the digital pathology is making them. It's making them more aware of what they're doing, as well as them taking even more additional steps, which sounds funny that we don't do it to begin with, but the problem is that now they're seeing things where they can actually make improvements on a day-to-day basis rather than within metrics that are a week, 2 weeks, or 3 months later. I've shown you and given you an example of what our QA/QC programs and how we were able to make that part of our success. But what I'm bringing to you next is the third approach to success. Everything within our entire process is integrated. We have nothing that is considered a secondary piece of software that is not interfaced or has any interoperability with our software. We demand this from our LIS and our vendors. We demand that this is needed because in order for us to take a grassroots approach to this, we need to make sure that all our information is at the fingertips, but not only of the pathologist, which you see here the pathologist can go in, whole slide imaging, select gross imaging and microscopic imaging, as well as do annotation and marks. But also every piece of information is readily available to the pathologist to make a good diagnostic decision on the tissue specimen in front of them. But what's even better, and what I'm going to show you right now, is we all look at the APLIS as being part of the pathologist's workstation or pathologist's workflow. But what we don't see is how we need to look at integrating QA/QC. So you'll see here within our system where we have implemented pre-analytics and analytic issues so that the histotechnologist can go ahead and provide information back to our pathologists. At this point in time, every time we put in an issue here, we're able not only to identify it, but also what action was taken in order to fix this situation as well as move forward. So what is this providing? A grassroots solution of integrating people with the interface of being used to using different types of screens as well as different types of locations to identify pieces of information. As you can see, once again, pre-analytic defects, as well as we start looking at EMRs. We currently have Epic within our system, so one of the things we used to measure a lot was pre-analytic defects of incorrect specimen, no data information, fixation issues, so on and so forth. But now, once again, in the digital world, what are the issues that are going to come across? For us, it's cancellation of orders, results not even making it back to the EMR, or incorrect pieces of information. So we need to be able to mark this. Now, the good thing about all this whole requisition data tab, as we call it, is this provides a one-stop shop for pathologists, histotechs, transcriptionists, administration. Everyone can see the entire life cycle of this case and see where the situation is and how they would be able to correct it. It also provides a communication tool so that as we keep moving forward, that everyone can see and there is a complete transparency for our processes. Once again, our analytic defects area as well as our post-analytics. Now we come to the area of digital pathology, of the QA/QC process. One of the things that we took in consideration at Yuma Regional Medical Center was when we are creating a digital slide, we are creating a representation of what that analog image is. So in order to do that, we understand that that is also a mathematical representation of colors, of signals, of red, so on and so forth. So with doing that, we needed to identify what QA/QC person was performing the test as well as the instrumentation doing it. This is one of the basic CAP requirements when you start looking at the core laboratory. Being able to identify the instrumentation that is creating the output as well as identifying the person creating the output. Okay? And this is all once again held within the anatomic pathology information system. So where does this all roll up into? What finally our customers receive, an integrated report with information that helps with the LIS, where we provide all the pieces of information as well as any type of digital image that would be able to show aesthetically pleasing aspects of our report. But once again, all the information is contained within the APLIS. So what are the future applications of where we see digital imaging going at Yuma Regional Medical Center? Once we see looking at integrating voice recognition. A lot of people you hear about natural language processing, being able to use voice to do CAP templates, being able to use voice to navigate. I can safely say that we here at Yuma Regional Medical Center can navigate our environment with our voice between digital imaging and anatomic pathology right now as we look at additional hierarchy pieces of information. Our future will also consist of interfacing logic to increase efficiency with digital workflow. There are still, even though we are integrated and we have interoperabilities, there are still a lot of situations where the technician has to make choices where the APLS would be able to help the technician out. And that's what we call about increasing logic, about being able to identify specific tissue types or stain types, that specific magnifications, rather than the technician having to make that point. We also believe in digital education. Currently we have a digital education course here at Yuma Regional Medical Center where I make all the techs go through, and for them to understand what it means to digitize a slide, not only from the perspective of our traditional analog process, but the theory of digitization, as well as understanding the background of illumination and other aspects of the digital workflow. And finally, what we're looking at is new service lines. What new service lines we're looking at? Providing a digital cockpit to our pathologists so that we start looking at ways of collaborating not only within our internal organization but externally, as well as accepting external consultations from other facilities, because one of the things I think, again, going back to boldly going where we've nowhere gone before, there's huge opportunity for us. I know lately with the information coming down about looming cuts and the situation of cutbacks on our reimbursement, you still have to understand that the future is bright. Do you realize that 70% of the expertise in the world of pathology resides in the United States? So we have a huge opportunity. And this is where digital pathology is going to be able to help us break through the next frontier and be able to start looking at different aspects of helping patients, as well as increasing technological efficiency and patient quality and care. Not only will digital pathology add to this, but what are the medical impacts? Informatics, therapeutics, molecular testing, and genomics. Through integration, all these pieces of information are going to be helping our pathologists, because right now we are in such a state of a revolution of where our technology and our abilities to be able to help patients out with their diagnosis is going to lead us into the next era of diagnostic medicine. So with that being said, what do we need to do now? Where do we need to fall in that? We need to start to, as histotechs, and understand, as well as administration and people in research, we need to broaden our influences. We need to expand beyond the tissue on the slide and use all diagnostic tools that are available to us, because the decisions we make in anatomic pathology are going to directly affect the quality and care of our patients. We need to market our services for consultation, not only internally to our network facilities and so on and so forth, but also externally. Because remember, the game's changing. It's not about the quantity that you do, but actually the quality that we're going to be able to provide and our results that we're going to be able to give. We need to expand the value of our influencing past the histology world. We all understand the issue of fixation times, all the different esoteric testing that's being asked of us. We need to be able to add our expertise in saying, is this the right situation that's actually happening with this patient, and come outside histology world, because we need to remember that we are a member of the disease management team. So I'd like to make a couple of acknowledgments. Once again, this is, I feel, could not be achieved without the help of these people directly on this list right here, but also especially my staff pathologist, my chief, Dr. Alvarez, all the histotechnicians here, transcriptionists, because once again, in order to have a good approach and a good product, you're going to have to take a grassroots solution. And one of the important pieces, I feel, is not only creating relationships, as you see right here, with these different aspects and these different organizations, but also your people, because your people is going to be your #1 driver in being able to get past this type of technology. With that, I'd like to thank everyone, and I guess I will take some questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation today, Jesus. I'd like to open this time up for some questions and answers from our audience. Please type them into the question box, and we will go ahead and get those answered. Sakura does have a digital microscope. It's quite different from the scanner that Jesus was talking about today. It is for live diagnosis, remote consulting, and we do have the ability to scan. So as the questions come in, I have a quick video that I'd like to share with you, the audience. While the video is playing, Jesus, I do have a question that has came in for you.
Okay.
It says, you briefly went over algorithms. May you discuss this more and discuss the different ones available to purchase? Do you have a preference?
Well, currently right now, algorithms, right now what we have our breast markers, which is considered ER, PR, HER2, Ki67, and P53. Those are the basic markers we have right now. We do not have the ability to create our own algorithm analysis at this point in time. There are different systems out there that are able to go ahead and help you with this type of situation. Different softwares such as Definiens or Visiopharm, as I know right off the top of my head, as well as other vendors. I don't want to be specific. But the algorithm analysis, and to be able to do this, is quite intense, as you have to go through a lot of patient samples and tissue. Developing an algorithm is a whole separate situation, and actually, if you would like to know, on the DPA website, which is the Digital Pathology Association, we will be coming out with a actually algorithm analysis paper or white paper that actually addresses these issues about algorithms, to take into consideration workflow, fixation times, because as I stated before, I mean, there's so many different aspects of the algorithm analysis that you have to take into consideration when you start looking at digital pathology. And just to name off a couple of them real quick, when you start looking at this situation, I'm going to give you kind of an example of what we kind of been thinking about here at Yuma Regional Medical Center. Okay. Excuse me, sorry. Excuse me. Some of the things you need to take into consideration when you're looking at algorithm analysis is, first off, what is your specimen collection and specimen preparation, your collection times, grossing, and processing, what is your sectioning, what is your staining, because each algorithm, based on light expression, so on and so forth, can vary in the way it reads the expression of the algorithm. You have to look at whole slide imaging. Are you going to be doing whole slide imaging? Are you going to do in static microscopy? Is it bright field? Is it fluorescence? And then the next thing I look is quantification. You know, what type of quantifications are you going to use, and what type of methods and techniques are you looking at? And the same token, what are the workflows? Like I said, I can go on and on and on about algorithm analysis, but we're going to be having a white paper coming out with the Digital Pathology Association that will address a lot of these areas. And if you want to, go ahead and email me. I think that my email address is on there, that we can go ahead and discuss this offline.
Thank you. I do have another question. It says, which scanner provides you the kind, which scanner provides you with the kind of data that you showed through the presentation? SoftPath is RLIS, and I wonder how interfaceable is this information provided by the scanner?
Well, the information you have in the scanner, once again, the scanner is going to be crossing over a digital image. And the information I showed you there on my LIS was actually something we went ahead and created within our own APLIS to be able to take into considerations the different aspects we were looking at. Our current scanners we use right now are the Corio Golds, which are the bioimage or the Ventana scanners. A lot of the data, as I said before in my presentation, is not automated. And this is where we need to start looking at the next generation of interfacing. Interfacing your scanners with your LIS, that's something you probably have to take up with your vendor and see where they're able to send pieces of information across to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm not getting any other questions in. I think that's probably because you provided such great detail throughout the presentation. Bye-bye.
Bye.